A combination of old coffee and lemon disinfectant fills the hospital's air. Those glaring overhead lights. They seem to be trying to impose geometry on the linoleum by casting sterile rectangles upon it. Hours ago, Kelly stopped paying attention to the minute things, such as the sound of the clock ticking and the squeak of the IV stands as they rolled. Those inaudible, microscopic sounds, however, served as a global announcement. As her wrist aches matched her chest pain, she settles into the hard plastic chair that sits at the foot of the bed and presses her palms together. Mark lay there, lifeless as a statue. Electronic beeps and hums sounded like robotic lullabies as the monitors chirped along. The skin on one side of his face seemed taut, as if pulled taut by an unseen force. Connecting his nose and neck were tubes that resembled small white lifelines. These tubes led to devices that displayed numbers that she had committed to memory over the past half an hour. Respirator machine hissed. He appeared ridiculously homely with a catheter tied to his elbow, as if it were a simple band-aid for a damaged world. Like patients just before medicine takes effect, he had been very awake and fidgety earlier. Disoriented, he attempted to talk with the tape covering his lips. Kelly leaned in close, pressing her forehead against the coolness of his brow, as the nurse muted the audio on the monitor for privacy. His vowels were as gentle as autumn leaves when he spoke. I want them. A frozen lake's piercing blue met his eyes as he opened them. The insight came in little, fragile pieces, and that made it feel terrible. Kelly sensed this remark would be the one that broke her heart the second he said the names. The children, who were their anchor and storm, were there. They were the incredible things that made him get out of bed every morning. Their private storm became public knowledge when he returned from rehearsal late, carrying a faint aroma of stage makeup and bitter coffee, and spoke their names loudly in the intensive care unit. Her voice quivered as she inquired, "Which ones do you mean, babe?" She could have spoken them all herself, but she preferred to listen to him. The syllables had to fall like surgical stitches for her. Once, then twice, he blinked. In a hushed tone, he named each one. All right, Mario, Lola, Beacon, Jonna, and Louisa, come on over. A faint, disappointed sigh escaped Kelly's lips as she let out a breath. The city shone with its customary disinterested lights outside the intensive care unit's glass walls. But within, things had become more complicated. The nurses' movements mirrored the methodical shuffle of crisis managers. Hands that appear unfazed yet secretly perform rapid computations. Teresa, a lady Kelly had grown to despise due to the fact that her competence served to emphasize Kelly's own powerlessness, was one of those people who gave her a shoulder rub. It's possible, Teresa whispered with confidence in her fearless eyes. You should issue a request. For immediate family members, visiting guidelines are lenient. We'll try our best to coordinate the sedation levels and the dangers of infection. The minute hand ticked by as Kelly kept an eye on the time. Within the next 2 hours, her mind raced with all the necessary arrangements. Everything from medication to school pickups to phone calls to the way teens channel their anger into subtle body language and sarcasm. She pictured the kids coming in line, their expressions changing from fear to courage to numbness and back again, much like the weather. As he stared at his father operating the equipment, she noticed that Mashio's jaw was becoming clenched. As if in prayer, she imagined Lola's hand stroking the sheet. She imagined Dwakon's tendency to just too soon. Clinging to Kelly's leg is Jonna, the baby, though she isn't exactly a baby anymore. The monotone quality of Louisa's voice is unmatched. She initially contacted Mashio. On the third ring, he responded, his voice diminutive as if someone had compressed him. Mom, he murmured. Kelly replied, It's Mom. But her words betrayed the frail thread of fear she was feeling. Would you be able to come? He inquired. You, all of you. It seemed as if the room were sucked dry by the weight of the paused quiet. Faraway static, like a radio switched between channels, could be heard by Kelly. I'm heading in that direction, Mashio finally announced. I'm leaving now. The others eventually came around. Kelly dialed Dwakon's number after Louisa and Jonna. They advanced toward an unrehearsed stage like a troupe of performers. Family logistics turned into courageous deeds in those brief, rushed hours. Someone in the neighborhood offered to pick Jonna up from choir. A trusted friend volunteered to take Lola there in her car. Nayo offered to take over Joan's shift at the cafe via text message. The notion of the children's arrival went from being a mere possibility to an unexpected reality as the little acts of kindness accumulated. Kelly instructed the nurses to get Mark ready, lower his bed, provide him with temporary pain treatment, and bring him as much attention as the machines would permit. The physicians had forewarned her about the dangers of infection and overstimulation. Individuals crammed into one intensive care unit cubicle. The doctor's warning lingered like thick smoke in the air. However, Kelly gave a little nod, her expression betraying her apparent vulnerability. The danger would be managed by her. She would control the din. If it meant getting Mark what he wanted, she would handle the world, if only for the hour. Beige walls and old magazines characterized the waiting room down the hall, which felt like a hellish place to be. However, sitting there was too much for Kelly. With her arms crossed over her chest, she stood beside the elevators, observing the digital numbers as they descended. Aside from individuals, there were other sounds as the doors slid open with a gentle pneumatic hiss. An energetic wall had been formed. Mateo was the pioneer among them to emerge. He appeared older than he had only a few days before. An unseen coat pressed down on his shoulders, causing him to slouch. With the coffee shop apron hurriedly stuffed into his back pocket, he wore his work uniform. A dark stain of espresso remained on his wrist. For an instant, he hid his expression like a child looking for his mother when he beheld Kelly. His spine tensed as he buried his panic beneath an air of stoicism that brought back so many memories of Mark that she felt her breath catch. He said, "Mom," in a harsh voice. No one asked him how Mark was doing. He merely drew her into an embrace that smelled of roast beans and rain and felt desperate. Like a raging river, the others followed behind him. Lola was extremely sleep-deprived. Her reddened eyes darted furiously toward the intensive care unit doors, and her hair was pulled back in a disheveled bun. With his hands buried in his hoodie pockets, Waken's normally jittery energy had transformed into a pulsating calm, and he appeared pallid. Little Jonna and Louisa clung to their elder siblings like barnacles, their wide, scared eyes taking in the sterile horror of the hospital even though they didn't really comprehend it. "Is he?" With a quiver in her voice, Louisa began, unable to finish the sentence. "He's holding on," Kelly informed everyone. The hushed tones she used were typical of a hospital hallway. "Typically, he is awake. Tubes are visible, and he appears enlarged. Please, be ready for that. Even though it doesn't resemble Dad, he is still present." Their terror washed over her. Receiving news of an accident or illness was one thing. The stark reality of medical intervention was something else entirely. As Kelly softly said, "Teresa says we can go in." She led them to the French doors. However, silence is required. No yelling out. The bed must not be shook. He must be calmed. It seemed like a march to sentencing as we made our way to the chamber. Under their feet, the linoleum patterns blurred, and the corridor appeared to lengthen. The gang faltered when they approached Mark's room's glass wall. It was a physical hit to see him through the window. With a noticeable hiccup in his breathing, Waken really stepped back. Amidst the machines, the molded ruin that Kelly had spent hours agonizing over, the man in the bed appeared diminutive. He was surrounded by an ear-piercing hissing sound, and the swelling on his face had intensified to a bruised purple. "All right," Kelly whispered as she pushed open the door. They swarmed into the cramped room, shouting, "Come on," as their bodies heated the air. Now the aroma of damp jackets and adolescent tension was cutting through the lemon disinfectant perfume. They stood there still for a long time. As they saw their father fight, they formed a semicircle at the foot of the bed, clearly afraid. The paralysis was broken by Lola. She approached Kelly from the other side of the bed with the cautious stride of an animal about to be cornered. She extended her hand and caressed Mark's untape-covered hand. "Dad," she murmured. Suspended in midair, the word lingered. There was a brief pause before the beeping of the monitor resumed. Eyelids fluttered across Mark's face. Even though he was heavily sedated, he was bound to his daughter's voice more closely than to any medication. He finally opened them. Tiredness and narcotics had diluted the blue. However, the moment his eyes fell upon Lola, the identification was immediate. A tear trickled down his face from the corner of his eye, finding its way clearly through the swelling. "Oh, look at him," gnawing on the tube. Dams are broken by noise. With a little cry, Jonna hid her face in Matteo's jacket. Mateo kept his word and stared intently at his father the whole time, even though he clenched his jaw and ground his teeth. Stepping forward, he planted a firmly grounding touch on Mark's shin, which he had been resting on the blanket. "We're all here, Dad," Mateo stated with a powerful voice. "Just like you said." Mark looks around the room as if to count them. Last but not least, He locked eyes with Kelly, his expression reflecting the profound appreciation she must have felt deep within her. His attempt at a nod caused one of the pumps to sound an alarm. The nurse, Teresa, emerged from the shadows cast by the nearby corner. As she reassured Mark, "Easy, Mark," she turned a dial. "Maintain a low heart rate. They're within easy reach." At last, Wachin, who had been standing at the far back, took a step forward. His typical wit had gone out the window, and he appeared afraid. Kelly saw him attempting to make sense of his fractured identity in relation to the man who had taught him to throw a spiral as he studied the swelling in the tubes. A man who could do no harm. The lame joke was ruined by Walken's voice cracking in the middle, but he said, "You look like you went 12 rounds with Tyson, Dad." That impact. Twitching his lips, Mark spoke. The smile was fleeting and agonizing, but it was there. He raised his palm, the one that Lola had her grip on, hovering an inch above the bed. A calling out. Jonna and Louisa, who were younger, were led closer by Kelly. They quavered with fear. Mark was like a superhero in their eyes. The physics of their universe were shattered when they saw Superman attached to a ventilator. By gently massaging Louisa's back, Kelly assuaged her fears. "Carefully place your hand on his arm."